Hello, everybody, and welcome to the course Doing Subaltern Linguistics. My name is Ahmad Mehboob, and I am Associate Professor of Linguistics at the University of Sydney in Australia. So this course is the first course offered by the Free Linguistics Conference. It's a free course, and it's open to anybody anywhere in the world. And as of at this present time, I'm really happy to share with you that we have 371 registrants, official registrants through the website, and these represent 47 different countries and over 150 languages. So we have a huge resource right here. People who are interested in language, people are interested in thinking about doing things with language rather than just analyzing language. And so that's what Doing Subaltern Linguistics is all about. And in this first talk, I will just try to introduce the notion of doing subaltern linguistics and try to share some of the main ideas that I hope that you will agree with, that we can perhaps consider as we develop our work on doing subaltern linguistics. And as you are doing this work, I'll be doing the same project with you. And that is in a sense creating this project and this course because we are all in it together. So I'm really excited that we'll have we've got things to do together. So what are we trying to really achieve, right? So if we're saying doing subaltern linguistics, how is language involved? You might ask, so how is it linguistics? Or what is it that we really want to do? So the main purpose here is that we know that there are a number of problems that we witness in our contexts every day. As researchers, many of us do research to document the nature of the problem or the extent of the problem. Now that's all done currently, but while we do this, the problems do not just go away. And so the purpose of doing something is to try to influence a change. Now, this could be something like if you're interested in sort of, I guess many of us are interested in issues of environment, and we want to, for example, help. We want to see a clean neighborhood. We don't want to see junk lying around, right? So now, how can that be done? One way of saying it is the government's, a responsibility to clean up the place. Well, it is. Yes, they should definitely be cleaning up the place. But part of the responsibility is also on the people who throw it, right? Now, as people who are doing subaltern linguistics, we can think about ways in which we can influence people to behave in a different way. Now, of course, this is not an easy thing to do, right? So when we're saying that we want to influence somebody's behavior, we want to, in a sense, that's a huge responsibility, right? But at the same time, it's not something that's easily done because we know that people will resist as well. There have been tons of campaigns around cleanliness for years and years and years, and yet we know also that that doesn't address the problems. So in some ways, we really have to think about how do we create these sort of discourses through our own languages, right? So if we want our community, our neighborhood to be clean, then in a sense, as educationists, as researchers, it is our responsibility to try to create projects, workshops, material, economies. They're all sort of interlinked as well, but trying to do something to address the problem. So now how do you do that? How can you influence somebody? And we always need to realize that there will be resistance, and there is resistance, and certain levels of resistance is extremely healthy because we know that we're engaged with people. But we also want them to, in a sense, stop throwing garbage everywhere. Right? So in a sense, if we want to create a project or a campaign around it, what could we do? How could we go about getting funds for it? Right? And that's the economy part of it, because things don't happen for free always, right? We can volunteer our time, but unless we have our basic sustenance met, we can't really actually have the time to do extra things. So we have to understand all of these things. So in a sense, it has to generate its own funds. Now that's really important because if your project is developing its own funds, then it's self-sustaining. right? And it's locally oriented, and you will be working with your community people, and using your own languages. That's the whole idea, right? So for example, if you want to create a campaign about cleaning up stuff, you have to understand the sociosemiotics of a place. Now, I've been using the word sociosemiotics. What do I mean by them? Sociosemiotics are essentially ways in which we as a species uh, operate in different cultures through different languages, and having different belief structures, having different ways of understanding our world around us. So we have all this diversity. So that, I'm just trying to understand the diversity is trying to do, essentially looking at subaltern linguistics and social semiotics. Social semiotics is our understanding of how we as a species make meanings of things around us. Now we can, and I want to add here that all social beings have this capacity, right? What I mean by that is anything that is social cannot exist as a social community without having some sort of a way of interacting with each other, which means they have some ways of meaning making. Now, those might be beyond a range of our human understanding. So, for example, we know that we can only see certain colors. We know that we can only hear certain range of sound frequencies. We know that these things are our human limitations, right? And that's why engineers can do stuff beyond that. But we also realize we do have evidence for how different species of animals and birds have different sensory systems. They have different ways of perceiving the world around them. They are not limited to the same color range that we are. They're not limited to the same sound frequencies we are. There are other ways of doing things. So it's very possible that they have ways of meaning making. That's just something that we don't understand. And there is quite a bit of evidence about it, and people have been talking about the negative consequences of high frequencies, for example, with 5G technology, and how that can impact the environment. So there is, especially in terms of affecting bee life, for example. And so we know that there are consequences of these things, and they're interrelated. So science does interrelate with biological beings. That's why, because material stuff and includes biological stuff, but biological is slightly different from material because it has life, right? So that's the difference between material and biological. Now, some of the subsects or subgroups of biological can also be social, right? So humans are social. We know that fish are social. We know that insects are social. We know that reptiles are social. So we know that these other creatures are social. Therefore, to exist as social organisms, they must also have some sort of a semiotic system. So they have to have social semiotics, and we may not understand them, but that doesn't mean they don't exist, right? And we need to respect that. We need to understand that, and we need to respect it, and we need to respect our environment, right? We need to respect our fellow human beings. And if that's the world that we want to live in, then we need to create it. And we can create it by understanding how these things work a bit in our own contexts. And you can use social semiotics by thinking about it in two different ways. Okay, so the first order semiotic systems are essentially about how we as human beings, with our five senses, connect to the world, right? Now, not everybody has or uses all the five senses, but that is not the main thing, because we as human beings, with whatever material senses we have, we can make a sense of our reality. So the material senses are sight, right? That's the first one. Sound, right? Very important. Smell, right? Touch, that's the largest organ we have, skin, right? And then taste. Now, there's a hierarchy in these five senses. It's quite important to understand that hierarchy, because that's how we make sense of the world around us, right? Language plays a very important part in it, and we'll come to it. But language is one part of it, right? So doing subaltern linguistics, we have to look at all the five senses, and when in a bit, I'll talk about how these five senses then connect to the ways that we think and the ways that we create social and semiotics systems around us, right? And it's this understanding that can allow us to create material and resources that can help stabilize and sustain our communities and direct them in ways where we have a harmony and peace and prosperity, right? That's what we all want. We want peace and prosperity for everybody, right? So how can we get it? We can either wait for others or we can create it ourselves. And we can create it ourselves by using social semiotics. Now how? Because you've got the five material senses with their hierarchy. And so how do I know this hierarchy exists? For example, if I see out very in the distant and I see that there are dark clouds, I can perhaps see that there may be a storm coming. I might even see flashes of lightning. But that storm is really far from us. Now, as the storm comes closer, I will start hearing the sounds of it, right? So see, in terms of proximity, sight goes the farthest. And then you have sound, which is still quite far, right? And the third one is a smell, because it's very proximal. It has to be not just very proximal, but we are also ingesting it. That is, we are taking it in, right? So it changes the nature of the sensory system. Now, and then we have touch, which means that if I can feel rain, or before feeling rain, if I can smell the rain in the air, it means it's pretty close. And then I can feel it, and then I can perhaps taste it too, right? So you can see there's a sequence, there's a natural order here, and that's quite an important order, because it also tells us that if for people who do not have sight, they can easily negotiate the world and create a fantastic world for themselves using access to the material senses that they do have access to. Right? So by understanding how we can communicate to people, so if you've worked around people with special needs, you, for example, will know how important touch is. The same thing with kids. Kids need touch, right? They need to be held, they need to be cuddled, they need to be felt. It's so important for the kids because that's part of how they communicate. It's the same thing with people who have different kinds of needs, with aged people. So we realize that touch is so important because when you cannot depend on your eyesight or your hearing as much, right, then touch becomes extremely important because it doesn't ingest you, but it allows you to connect with you. But it's not the same as tasting, because tasting for a human relationship is very intimate, right? Now, that's why we can also understand how a mother and a child bond is so important and so strong. It's strong because a mother and child have all five material senses connected with each other. And in addition to that, right, they're building a bond of understanding, of laughter, of joy, of meanings. So that's how a child is sort of coming into and connecting to the rest of the world and creating meaning around them. Now, notice as the child grows and creates their attitudes and creates their beliefs, how did they start doing it? Through the five material senses, right? Or whatever the material senses we work with, right? So if we want to think about how we want to influence people so that there's not a lot of garbage around, then we have to think about creating campaigns that can make people realize things at all those senses, and using those senses create an attitude towards something which will then impact change, right? And this of course takes time, and it needs cooperation, and that's why I think doing subaltern linguistics is essentially creating participatory citizenship, where we as parts of our citizens of our own communities, we do things within our own communities using our own expertise. Now, that is really research. That's true research. Because true research is not about how many papers you publish. True research is about what impact you have on your community. Now, because it's extremely difficult to measure impact, a lot of the modern reviewing agencies and ranking systems use number of publications simply because it's an easy thing to count, not because it's a real impact. Right? In fact, if you meet the real impact, if you're really having an impact on your community, then you will realize that it's very easy to actually write a paper that gets published. Why? Because you're reporting on something that's new, that changes things, and that's what the best journals are looking for. I'll tell you, as a former co-editor of DSaL Quarterly, that's what we were looking for. We were looking for papers that would be groundbreaking in what they're doing, right? We wanted people to be doing things and showing us they're doing things, not just doing attitudinal surveys, for example, right? We want to do things, and once you've done things, you can document it. and then you can publish it, and you will realize that the impact of that publication is huge. And in a sense, this is something you can do with your classes. If you're not a researcher, if you're a teacher, right? If you work in a different industry, it doesn't really make a difference, because what we are doing is creating understandings of how we make meaning and using them in what we want to use them for. So if you're an engineer, if you're a doctor, if you're a chemist, if you do plumbing, you're a tour guide, if you're a pharmacist, anything really, it's open to anybody, because we can apply these understandings to create better context in whichever place we are. And remember this: we're not telling you what to do; you do it yourself. We just want us to develop the tools so that we can do it ourselves. Because right now, a lot of stuff that we read, it's a lot of theory, but very little practice. Right? If there was a lot of practice around, it's like, how many PhDs do we need? It has the increase in the number of PhDs in our countries actually resulted in something that has changed in our lives? Have our societies stabilized? Now, if they haven't, should we not give it a try to something that might be new, a sort of a new way of doing things, a new way of doing research based on impact, right? Creating environmental projects, for example, creating projects around healthcare, creating projects around law, right? Creating laws around, for example, policies, issues like bullying, right? Again, there's so many things around us, and it doesn't always have to be something that's a big issue. It could be something that you do very, very locally. If there are issues around communication between two communities across some sort of a cross-cultural communication issue, create the resources so that there is a better cross-cultural communication, so that there is people across the community can interact with each other and positively impact each other's lives. Because diversity has always been around us. It's not like the world is more diverse today. The world has always been diverse, right? So this idea that things are now all of a sudden different, they are different because the diversity that used to exist is being crushed, because there's a constant push towards unifying everything in different ways. And we'll come back and talk about these things later on. But doing subaltern linguistics is essentially about making our own lives better and doing it ourselves, right? And I hope this first talk has given you some ideas and perhaps raised more questions. I don't want to make this video very long, so I'll wait for you to have a watch, and then post your questions. If you don't understand something, let me know. If you've got examples to give me of things that you've been doing, or if you have things you have observed, then please share them, and then I will have a look at those, and then I'll record a second video to share with all of us. All right, all. Have a good morning, afternoon, night, wherever you are. All right.